Hi, everyone, and thank you for attending session 1 of Tax Talent's Virtual Tax Club. This 6-session webinar series is designed to give you the knowledge to obtain a top-tier tax position. We've brought together some of the industry professionals to view tricks of the trade and promote a successful career in tax. In our first session, we'll be discussing aligning your education for future success at your tax job. This webinar is designed to be an open forum, and we encourage you to ask any questions you may have. However, to eliminate background noise, we'll give all participants on mute. To ask your question, please utilize the chat function on your toolbar. If you prefer to verbally ask your question, please utilize the raise hand option and I will clear the floor for you. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce, Omri Marian, Professor of Law at University of California, Irvine School of Law. Omri, if you want to take it from here, please give a brief introduction to yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Omri.
Yeah, glad to be here. So, as said, I'm a professor of law at the University of California, Irvine School of Law. I'm also the academic director of the brand new graduate tax LLM program that we have here. We just started our first, we just matriculated our first cohort. Before that, I taught at the graduate tax program at the University of Florida. I practiced at the New York office of Sullivan and Cromwell before going into academia, and I did my LLM and SJD in taxation at the University of Michigan. The purpose of my brief presentation is basically to tell you what you can already start doing while in law school to build your tax credentials. The idea is that when you interview during law school, you need to be able to tell a convincing story to tax interviewers about why you want to do tax. And not only that you have to be able to tell the story, you need to be able to substantiate it with the stuff that you have already done. So my purpose here is to tell you what you can do as early as your second year in law school to start gearing yourself towards a tax career. So first thing I want to discuss is really just curriculum choices that you might want to do. And the first thing, let's start on the left-hand side here of the slide. You really need to take the basic tax class as soon as possible. If you think you might be interested in a tax career, there are two reasons for it. First of all, the basic tax class is the prerequisite to all other tax classes. So you don't want to find yourself in a position where you haven't taken the basic tax class and you cannot take other tax classes till you have taken federal income tax or basic tax or baby tax, whatever it's called at your school. I have people suddenly in the 3L year coming to me and telling me I want to take international tax or corporate tax or stuff like that, but they didn't take the basic tax class, which means their opportunities are very limited. So take basic tax as soon as possible. If it's in your 1L year curriculum, take that. So some schools do that. If not, take it as soon as possible in your second year. The other reason why you want to do it, because this is how you get your first exposure to what tax law is. Even if you have other tax experience as an accountant, you really want to see what tax lawyers do, and you may not like it. So, and if you, in my experience, basic tax class or federal income tax is something that people either really, really like or can't stand. So if you really like this class, then yeah, take other tax classes. The next thing you want to think about is what other tax classes, and this is what I call the Big Four tax classes. So we don't only have Big Four accounting firms, we have Big Four tax classes. These are the absolute must classes you have to take during law school to be able to make a convincing argument that you are really, truly an interested tax person. So you've already taken the basic tax class. The other classes that are really the core classes you have to take at law school are corporate tax, partnership tax, and international tax. There is no tax lawyer today that doesn't need to know something about all of these areas. Whatever is your everyday practice, you will do a little bit of corporate tax, you will do a little bit of partnership or pass-through taxation. Very few businesses don't have international component to them today, so you really need these basic issues. One note is that some schools offer class on taxation of business entities, which is a combination of corporate and partnership tax together. Try to avoid it if you can. If your school offers separate corporate and partnership tax, take these as separate classes in your JD. And I will tell you honestly that even though I want people to come to my program and do an LLM, if you take these 4 classes, you significantly improve your chances of getting a tax job straight out of the JD program. And honestly, if you get the tax job you want out of the JD, it's not clear that you have a good reason to do an LLM. I mean, if you need the LLM to get a specific job, yes, but these are the 4 classes that may actually put you in a position to get a tax job straight out of the JD. Another thing that will really help you support your application to any tax position is to do practical tax things. All schools almost offer something in tax, like a low-income taxpayer clinic. You can do an IRS externship or state tax administration externship wherever you go to law school. This looks fantastic on your resume. The fact you actually did some tax controversy work or some policy work at the IRS will be great. And finally, the other thing that you have, if you already know what you want to do, take the niche courses that support you. For example, if you know what you're interested in is wealth management or estate and gift taxation planning, take estate and gift taxation. Take taxation of high net worth individuals if your law school offered that. Take tax exempt organizations. If you are interested in transactional tax, take advanced corporate tax, take taxation of financial instruments. If you are interested in international tax, take transfer pricing. I had JD students that did 20 credits of tax classes during their JD. There is no reason to wait for it till the LLM. If you know what you want to do, just take these classes. One thing I will also note is that you need to take non-tax supportive courses because you really need to be a well-rounded lawyer. But you need to be smart about selecting these classes. So for example, if you want to be a transactional tax lawyer, definitely take business association or other corporate governance class or stuff like that. If you want to be a tax controversy lawyer, take all the various procedure classes, evidence classes, the stuff that will really support your practice. So that's about the classes you can select that will really make you look good as a tax candidate straight out of your JD. But there are other things you can do while in law school, and I want to cover them. Next slide, please. Okay, so the absolute most important thing that you can do in law school, connect with your tax faculty. In almost all tax faculty that I know came from practice. They maintain practice relationship. Tax faculty mostly are very nice people. If you show your tax faculty that you're a serious tax person, they will be interested in your success as a tax lawyer. They will help you. Become the research assistant, ask questions, reach out, ask for advice. Tax faculty love to talk about tax and tax career. Utilize office hours. You want them to know you because when it's time to apply, you need someone to support you. And if a member of the tax faculty supports you, it will be immensely helpful. It goes without saying that you need to maintain high grades, but it actually is okay in most cases if your grades are mediocre, as long as your tax grades in tax classes are high. So if you are kind of around the 3.2 overall, but your tax classes grades are 3.6, 3.7, put that on your resume, actually. This will show that you're a serious tax person and that you know your stuff. I will say that also some opportunities require specific grades. So for example, the IRS honors program required that you maintain a certain GPA level. So you want to aim there so you can actually go to the IRS honors program. Almost all schools have tax activities. Participate in them. These are networking opportunities. In our law school, we have a tax law society, which is a student-run organization. Most law schools have tax law society or some other tax law student organization, join the organization, organize events. It is an opportunity for you to reach out to practitioners to come to law school, to your law school. Join the ABA section on taxation, which is free for students, and attend events. If there are ABA tax events in your area, attend them. There are always young lawyers or students events at the ABA tax lawyer, a section of taxation meetings, a perfect networking opportunity. Join your local tax bar association. So here I have my students attend the Orange County Bar Association section of taxation event. Actually, we have an event today on campus of the Orange County Bar Association Young Tax Lawyers. But you don't need the faculty to tell you to do that. You can do it on your own. Reach out to your local tax organization. You can work part-time if you're able at a local tax firm. This will give you a great practical experience. And you can also have the summers directed towards your tax careers. Government, both the IRS and the DOJ tax division have summer programs. You should reach out to them and try to get in. Again, looks great on your resume and actually gives you an experience, gives you the experience or work at a tax firm for a summer. By the way, if you get a summer job, many times summer jobs are kind of generalistic, but when you get in the first day, they ask you which areas you're interested in. If you say tax, you'll get to do tax work because not many students say they want to do tax in their summer. And this will give you another opportunity to experience with tax work. Another option, if you're more policy oriented, try to join a tax think tank. There are millions of them, from the extreme left to the extreme right, whatever your poison is, and everything in the middle. You can find them and join them and do policy work. I would like to refer you to something that is called the Fiscal Internship Program of the Peterson Foundation. Just Google it, you'll find it online. It's basically a one-stop shop at the Peterson Foundation that will help you to get summer positions with tax think tanks, left and right leaning. It's a great opportunity to do some tax policy work if this is what you're interested in. And if you do it during law school, this really puts you in a great position to do it after law school, to work in tax policy. That's all I have to say. I have a lot more to say generally, but I'm assigned to only discuss what to do in law school. This is what you should do in law school, and I'm happy to answer any questions now or later or whenever. By the way, you can reach out to me. You can find me online. It's easy. Feel free to shoot me an email directly to my personal email. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about tax and law school. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you, Omri. We did have a question come in. It says, what are some of the best ways, or how do you recommend networking with faculty?
So first of all, be on alert to, well, actually, no. The first thing, take their classes and excel in their classes. I mean, faculty notice this. The other thing, be on alert for if there is an opening for a tax faculty research assistant position and apply. Another thing you can do is utilize office hours. It is absolutely fine to just come in office hours, or even not during office hours. Just shoot an email to your tax professor saying, I'm really interested in tax and I need some advice. I want to know how can I prepare myself for a tax career? Can we have a conversation? 99% of the time, the tax faculty will be more than happy to actually respond, because honestly, most people don't come to law school to be tax lawyers. So when people do ask us questions about how to become tax lawyers, we enjoy the attention. So we will respond. I always respond, and all the faculty that I've ever worked with, the tax faculty, have always responded to students simply asking them to talk about tax in general, what tax classes to take in law school, and tax careers. And you may never know how it will end up. Maybe the faculty just happens to know of a job opening in the area you're interested in, and will refer, and didn't know you that you're interested in it, and now they know, and they will refer you. So you'll be amazed how small of a world is the tax practice. There are a lot of tax practitioners, but somehow we all know someone that knows someone, where it's like 2 or 3 degrees of separation max in the tax world. So if you don't already know the person. I hope it answers the question, but basically just reach out, don't be shy, shoot an email directly is fine, and do all the other things I said. Take classes, try to be RA. Yeah.
Perfect.
So you did mention Adam. Oh, I just wanted to comment on what Amaury just said. I've been the career coach for Tax Talent's Career Forum for many years, and I can tell you without a doubt, the faculty can play a key role in helping someone land that first tax job right out of school. So he's spot on in terms of utilizing the faculty and making sure you have a good relationship there. That's really good advice.
Thank you, Adam. So we did have another question come in. You did mention the Cisco program, but do you have any other tips for obtaining a worthwhile internship or part-time work during the summer?
I mentioned the what? The which program? Sorry.
Cisco, I believe it was called.
No,
I mentioned internship?
I mentioned the Peterson Foundation program, but whatever tax work you can do in the summer, you should do. So for the one thing you can do when you have on-campus interviews for summer positions, one frequent mistake that I see students do in such interviews is when they're being asked what kind of work do you want to do, they are being very unspecific about their answers because they just want the summer position, which I understand where it comes from. But in my experience, if you know what you want to do and actually say that this is what you want to do, you come out as much more serious practitioner, more mature. This person knows what they want to do and he or she is preparing themselves for this. So if you know you want to do tax work and you interview with the firm that you know has tax practice, tell them that. When they ask you what you want to do during the OCI session, tell them, I really want to explore the option to become a tax lawyer. I find it really interesting. And again, because there aren't that many people in law school that already know they want to do tax, actually it dramatically improves your chances to get a summer position if they know that their tax practice wants summer. I mean, you shouldn't be extremely specific about tax because you don't want to close the door on other options. So you can say something about, I'm interested in transactional practice, but and mostly within transactional practice, I'm interested in tax. So this gives you an opportunity to be both in tax and something else that is not tax, but in your area of interest. Other than that, reach out to all the government agencies, which I mentioned, DOJ and IRS. You can look it up online. They have a very clearly explained web pages about how to apply to their programs. Another thing you can do, again, this is based on my experience, almost all major state tax administrations have some form of summer opportunity for law students, and they are hungry for talent. People are not aware of this opportunity, and I don't think that the state tax administrators do very good work in marketing this opportunity. But I can tell you that we already, in California, we have the Franchise Tax Board, the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, and the Office of Tax Appeal, which are 3 of the 17 million tax administrators in California. There are like a lot of tax administrators here. They all have tax summer programs, which I even didn't know about before moving to California. But now I do, and I send students there. You can find out in the state you're in and you're at, what are the different, who is the major tax administrator at the state level, and try to get a summer position there. Even if you don't think if this is where you want to end up, working for government or state government, again, it looks awesome on your resume. The fact that you, oops, the light went off, just a second. It's Yes, it's a movement sensor. So so the go to the try to get a position within your state tax administration, local state tax administration. This looks fantastic on your resume. All large multinational corporations have to deal with state issues, and it's tax. It's still tax, even if it's not federal. And it means that you learn to speak the language, you learn the process of tax controversy, or think about tax planning, whatever the issue is vis-a-vis the state tax administration that they have to deal with. So it is a great ticket in. If you do it between the 2 and 3L, and then OCI in the 3L year, they say you did IRS or you did state administration tax work. Okay, this is a serious tax person. We should really consider this person.
Perfect.
Carissa,
Thank
this
you.
is Tony. Carissa,
yes,
this is Tony Santiago. Can you hear me, Carissa?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just wanted to add to that. So my experience, I'm the president of Tax Search and Tax Talent, and been doing this for over 30 years and helping people find roles. When I'm talking to students about internships and trying to get them started, I am absolutely 100% in agreement with Omri, how critical it is and a differentiator it is. I try to make it simple for them to understand. There is the government pool that Omri just discussed at the federal level and the state level. There is the actual corporations themselves where you could go in as an intern in an in-house role. And then there's the service providers, which predominantly is the law firms and the public accounting firms, the Big Four and some of the national firms. When approaching for internships, I highly encourage students to really focus on being more direct marketing as well. Use the professors exactly like Omri said, without a doubt, but also your alumni. That network is a lot stronger than people give it credit for. And I'm talking about law students who graduated from your law program, but also students that have graduated from the LLM and tax program at those universities you attend. And you should work with your placement office to identify who those are. You can also find them using Martindale-Hubbell, which any major library will give you access to. And that is a directory listing of those who are attending, members of the law firms themselves. You can use LinkedIn as another source to identify these people and effectively find them in the public accounting firms, in the corporations, and again at the law firms as well. And if you really take that and build a marketing campaign to this effect and really add that on top of what was already been told, you will not have a problem getting an internship. If you've taken some of the classes Omri just described there, you'll be in great shape. A little bit of work there, but it will pay off for you.
I mean, it's a lot of work, as you just said, but I have to agree, nothing beats the personal, direct approach. So it's true. I mean, I discussed the opportunities. I didn't discuss how to actually get them. And I completely in agreement with Tony. Just reach out to people you can find any connection with. Law school, fantastic. If they graduated from the same law school, tell them. Again, tax people enjoy talking. They enjoy talking about tax. And if you reach out, tell them that you are seeking advice the same way I told you should do with your faculty. In 99% of the cases, they will respond and they will talk to you. They'll have lunch with you. And yeah, start to build your network at law school.
All right, perfect. Thank you both for that great advice. I think we're going to move on to our next section. We do have one more question, but we're going to hold it to the end just so we make sure we have some time for it. So in our next section, we are going to have Paul Iannone, founder of Tax Career Advisor, LLC, who will be discussing your first job in a law firm, public accounting, corporate, or government. Paul, can you please give us a brief introduction to yourself and then take it from there?
Sure. Thank you. I'm very happy to be on this webinar. So just a little bit of background about myself. I am the founder of Tax Career Advisor, and that's a career advice firm for tax professionals. I also have my own law practice. I'm a tax lawyer in Connecticut, and I've been practicing tax now, it says in the bio here, for over 35 years. It's exactly 44 years. I started in 1975. I started with the IRS, and I pretty much worked in almost all the venues. So I have a feel for each one of these. I started with the IRS. I spent 8 years with the IRS. I then moved to a public accounting firm where I became a tax partner. And then late in life, around 39 years old, I decided to go to law school. With a young family, I went to law school at night, working during the day. I left the public accounting firm. Working tax season and going to law school is difficult because law school is 4 nights a week. And so I left the public accounting firm and went to work for a large multinational firm, corporation, where I was able to work almost a 9-to-5 job and get to class on time. I worked for 2 large corporations, and then it was about the time that the Enron scandal hit, and I decided to leave corporate America, and I joined academia. I was a professor at Sacred Heart University for 4 years, teaching tax and business law. Eventually, my kids were going to college. I needed extra money, and so I ended up at Deloitte for 4 years, 6 years in Manhattan. When I was a little bit older, I was in my 50s at that time. Eventually, I left New York and joined a law firm in Hartford, Connecticut, and now I'm on my own. I have my own law practice. So I touched almost all the areas. The only thing I haven't really touched is publishing. So that's a little bit of background about myself. But what I'm here to talk about is your first job when you're out of law school and maybe out of the LLM program. So if we can go to the next slide. So this slide, you see it's got two parts to it. We've got the education side and the credential side. And a lot of this is going to really overlap what Omri was talking about. I agree with everything he was saying, and I'm just going to add to that. So on the left-hand side, the education part of it. So if you're serious about tax, my recommendation is to go for the LLM in tax. You graduate law school, go for it. Go for the LLM in tax. It's not only good for your resume, but it's also it teaches you really the 4 corners of the Internal Revenue Code. You're going to touch it all. Now, in my case, I was a CPA first, and then I went to law school. So I never went for the LLM in tax, but I got a Master's of Science in Taxation, a very similar degree, but for non-lawyers. And I have to tell you that without that degree, there was no way that I could practice tax. It taught me most of it because it's an in-depth study. You get a chance to read the regulations and rulings and case law. And for me, without that program, I don't think I could have ever done the job. So big recommendation for the LLM in tax. You have to see some of the other bullets I have down here. I say take at least 2 basic principles of two basic courses, right? The principles of accounting courses. And you're going to find that the practice of tax really is interwoven with accounting so much. You really need to know financial statements, how to understand financial statements, the relationships between assets, liabilities, and equity. Because tax, when you're practicing tax, you're going to be practicing a lot in the business area, and you're going to be reading financials. So if you already have an accounting degree in your undergraduate, you're really a very big step ahead. And let me just say to anybody on the phone who has an undergraduate degree in accounting, please sit for the CPA exam when you can. And having the CPA letters combined with that JD and an LLM in tax, I have to tell you, it's a very, very powerful and a very good marketing for your own resume. I also say enroll in every tax course offered. So if you go to a school that has in your JD program more than 1 tax course, take them all. And as Omri suggested, work in a tax clinic if your school has one. I think most of the schools that offer LLM in tax, I would think have a tax clinic. There's even one in Connecticut here that does not have an LLM in tax, but does have a very good tax clinic. On the right-hand side, I just talk about credentials. Things Omri mentioned as well, clerkship in a federal or state court. See if you can find a clerkship in a court that hears tax cases. The next bullet is really a universal bullet. Work on essential skills and success. For example, your writing and oral communication skills, really important. When you're going in for those interviews, they're not only assessing all the great things that's on your resume, they really want to see how you present yourself. and eventually your writing skills will be very, very important. The last bullet, take the bar exam as soon as you graduate, and try to pick the state where you want to work and take the bar exam. I know some people that have their JDs and never took the bar exam. I also know many accountants who have a degree in accounting who never sat for the CPA exam or any of the other credentials. So my advice, again, take the bar exam. Maybe you might want to do that first and enroll in the LLM program as quickly as you can. Okay, next slide. So I think Tony mentioned there's choices for where's your first job going to be. So we have at the top here in blue, broad exposure versus subject matter expert or industry specialist. So at some point in your career, you're likely to end up as a subject matter expert or a specialist, or you might be a specialist in a particular industry. That's where the career is going these days. The big accounting firms, the big law firms, they do like specialists. Things are getting more specialized. Myself, I'm a generalist, but I have certain pockets of specialties. So that's also a way to go. And I'll tell you, there's not many generalists left out there, and being a generalist is almost being a specialist, Shay. So let's just go through. I put down, we have 4 big areas of possible employment. On the left, we have public accounting. I'll just go to public accounting. We've got government, corporate, law firm. What's not here, I guess, is publishing and academia. But these are the main ones I see people gravitating to as soon as they get out of school. So, you're graduating as a lawyer. You might say, well, why would I want to go to a public accounting firm? Well, I have to tell you that there's more tax being practiced, I think, in public accounting firms than in the other areas, maybe shy of the IRS. So in terms of really good, solid experience, and really, if you don't have any accounting or tax experience, if you're able to get into a public accounting firm, even if you don't like it, it's going to give you really valuable experience. You're probably going to start out maybe even in the compliance area, preparing tax returns. You may hate it, but I'll tell you, it's really the foundation and fundamentals. And then eventually you'd like to move into more of a consultancy or an advisory role. So in public accounting, we have them separated. We have the big 4 accounting firms. Those are the national, those are the real big ones. Having that on your resume, wonderful, excellent experience. There's also another level right down, another national accounting firm level that's not the big 4. And there might be 10 or 12 firms in that area, firms like Grant Thornton, BDO, Cohn-Resnick, that are national firms, big firms, but not at the big 4 level. They like hiring lawyers also. I have to tell you that the big 4 firms, they love hiring lawyers. They love hiring lawyers that have accounting courses or an accounting background. And then a CPA lawyer, they love it. In my group at Deloitte, I was in the merger and acquisition group in Manhattan. Everybody in my group was both a CPA attorney. So let's see, underneath the national firm, we have medium regional accounting firms. They mostly gravitate towards accountants, but I'll tell you, a lawyer that's got some accounting courses and maybe an accounting degree, a medium-sized or regional accounting firm will give you terrific experience. I would not discount that. If you can get into a national firm and then the big 4, obviously, for your resume and for your overall experience, I think that would be a home run. Then, of course, at the very bottom, we have small or local accounting firms. They're looking for probably more accountants than lawyers. But again, if you're struggling and you're having difficulty finding work and one of these small firms is willing to pick you up, I wouldn't discount that either. Just moving over to government, the major employer is IRS or the Treasury Department. IRS, I started there, wonderful experience. It wasn't a place that I wanted to stay the rest of my career. I was there for roughly 8 years. I was a revenue agent, and I then moved into the appeals office. Terrific experience. There again, though, it's government work, and you're not going to get the broadest exposure. Once I left government and went into private, into public accounting, into the private world, my sphere of exposure really expanded. But in terms of just practicing tax, pure tax, I'd recommend it. The other two, Senate Finance Committee, Joint Committee on Taxation, these are committees that do hire lawyers, tax lawyers, and these jobs are mostly seated in Washington, D.C. I think they're few and far between. To get one of these jobs is probably a little bit more difficult, but something you should not discount either. The IRS jobs, you can go on their website and apply. Applying for the government's jobs is a little bit more difficult sometimes than a private job. There is quite an application process and a background check. I was really shocked at the background check they did on me. They had the FBI does an investigation. They talk to your neighbors and family. So you just have to be prepared for that sort of in-depth look at yourself. Corporate's kind of a tough area to get into for your first job. I think if you had an internship and then you rolled into the corporate job, I think that's a possibility. To go right from law school into a corporate tax job, probably a little bit more difficult. I'm not saying impossible. Again, if you had an internship, I think you'll get there. We break it down. In the corporate world, you've got compliance, that's tax return preparation, the tax provision for the financial statements. So you've got, a federal position. We also have state and local tax that was mentioned before, and then something called indirect taxes, which are your sales tax and other miscellaneous taxes. So within most corporate tax departments divide this way. They also have international and planning. For me, planning and international was the most exciting and fun. Most of my practice today is international. The last one is law firm. And, I went on one of the websites for one of the predominant tax law firms in the world, Withers Worldwide. And I just went on their website, and I noticed two things. I noticed that they like graduates at, more like Ivy League type schools, prestigious schools possibly. But they also had a job for a tax associate, and I noticed they were looking for somebody with 3 years experience and 3 years tax experience in either a large public accounting firm or a large law firm. But they also had a great summer program. I read through that. So if you're able to get into a summer program and get some experience, it would really maybe give you that foothold into a permanent job. I think getting a job in tax in a law firm a little bit more difficult than maybe public accounting. And I just think that there's more tax going on in public accounting and maybe more tax in the corporate world. In law firms, you either find a firm that has a huge tax department where they could absorb, a newer person, or you get some experience in someplace else and then move into a law firm. There's national law firms. I have down here boutique law firms. There are some law firms that specialize just in tax. And Withers Worldwide is one of those huge law firms, and they specialize in tax. And then there's other law firms, small law firms. I think, for example, a law firm I worked for before I had my own practice, I was the only tax lawyer in the firm. And so I need to have lots of experience because everything would come to me. I didn't have anybody else to push work down to. So the smaller law firms, I think you're going to need experience. Okay, next slide if we can. These next two slides, public accounting versus corporate. I get this question all the time. And I know the people on the call are lawyers, but if they're trying to choose between public accounting versus a corporate position, these are just some of my own personal perspectives. And so I would take these with somewhat of a grain of salt. They're coming from me personally, but I'll just go through a few of these. So many people leave public accounting, for example, to go into the corporate world because they're either burnt out with public accounting and, it's a hard life, especially during tax season. You're working tremendous hours. And they think, well, maybe I'll go to a corporate tax department that is not so intensive and the overtime is not as great. I have to tell you what I'm seeing today is that because the corporate tax departments are so lean that the people are working much harder and the work is it's a heavier workload than it used to be. I still think it's a little bit better in work-life balance than in public accounting. Some of the other bullets I'll just mention here. I think there's a bigger demand for tax professionals today in public accounting than in any other of these areas, even more so than corporate. The public accounting profession is really in desperate need of tax people. If you're looking to go into tax, I think you picked a great one. If you're willing to spend some time in public accounting, I don't think you're going to have any trouble getting a job and getting some pretty good experience. Let's see. I find that public accounting is a little bit more of a dynamic environment. You work on a lot of things. There's a lot of variation. You're on multiple clients. I found that working in the corporate side, I seem to see the same issues year in and year out. I spent 8 years in corporate, and I have to tell you that I found public accounting to be a little bit more exciting from that standpoint. But clearly, as the last bullet point points out, for me, it was really a higher level of stress working in public accounting than the big corporation. But the work was a little bit more exciting, I think, and the variety of work was there. We can go to the next slide. I'll just mention a couple of these things. If you're considering public accounting or corporate, you have that choice. Here's just some considerations. Your personal life, health, and other obligations are tailored to the hours and pressures of tax season in a public accounting firm. So, from January to April 15th, then it seems to continue on. Tax returns for individuals are due in October. Tax season now seems to be extended from January to October. You're really tied to that calendar. There's hours and there's pressures. Other considerations, the variety of work and the challenge of the assignments. If you like interacting with many clients versus one big client, when I was working for the big corporation, I always viewed that my employer was my client and that I was working for one client. If you like the idea of having multiple clients, public accounting, and I guess, as I'm thinking about it, you could substitute law firm here for public accounting if you want. I think it'll give you the same result. There's overtime with public accounting. Consider fringe benefits and work schedule flexibility. In public accounting and a big law firm, the prize is, of course, being a partner. And so you have to really weigh, is it being a partner in a law firm or a public accounting firm, is that really a goal of mine? Versus maybe advancing in a corporation, becoming the vice president of tax. This is something that I think people disagree with me a little bit. I find that public accounting, you're working a little bit more independently. They throw things at you. You're expected to complete them, and there is some review and oversight. In the bigger corporations, I found that there was a little bit more teamwork involved. A big factor for the second bullet from the bottom for lawyers that are in law firms or accountants and lawyers in public accounting, there is personal liability for mistakes. Once the malpractice insurance runs out, you're liable personally for mistakes. That is a consideration. I have my own law practice right now, and it's something I think about all the time home at night. Fortunately, nothing's happened yet, but it does happen. And then the last bullet, when you're in a law firm or public accounting, you're expected to develop new business. A successful partner has to bring in new business. Unless you work in such a large environment that they're looking for only your technical background, I find that even in the Big Four, when I was at Deloitte, we were expected to sell, if you want to use that term, sell services, etc. So these are some considerations if you're trying to weigh. Let's again substitute, law firm versus corporate or public accounting versus corporate. I think that's it for that slide. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you,
Paul. That's what I have. Oh, you're welcome.
We did have some questions come in. So one of the main ones that you kind of touched on in a few different ways, but it says, you said there's a high demand for tax professionals in public accounting. Can you elaborate further on why that is?
Yeah, I could tell you. Public accounting, when the people that are majoring in accounting, they get out of school and they hear a lot about the Big Four and some of the demands on your time. And there's a lot of students that are staying away from public accounting, and they are trying to get into the corporate world. And they hear horror stories, et cetera. I think many are exaggerated. And the tax world is so complex today that to get the tax work done at all these firms, they just need more and more people. And I think that the demand and the complexity of tax is really driving it. And again, the public accounting firms are doing most of the tax work, I have to tell you. Even some of the large corporations have outsourced their tax departments to some of the Big Four.
If I may,
there's so much work out there. So much work.
I'd like to add a point here, if I can.
Sure.
One thing that happened, obviously, is the tax reform in 2017. Completely changed the international tax landscape. And at least one of the things that I'm seeing that is happening now, first, it generates a lot more work because there's just a whole new law to learn. And this is a perfect opportunity to get into the tax practice. And it happens once every 3 decades. The students that are now in law school, are the first generation that studies the new law in organized manner. Others have to do it on the job. So basically, you get into the practice with huge benefit, the same way that people graduating in 1986, 1987 got into practice after the 1986 reform. So first, they need you. They need people that know the new law or learn the new law. And the other thing that I've seen happening, and I've heard, this is anecdotal, of course, I've seen that there are a lot of retirements in the tax profession now, people that are near retirement and weren't sure whether they want to retire or not. With the new law, decided, yeah, you know what, I'm not going to start learning everything all over again. I'm just going to take this opportunity and retire. And this created a huge movement upwards in large accounting firms, more than usual. So people that were about to be promoted now promoted. So basically, there is a whole shift upwards, which means the bottom level, entry level, and manager level, they really miss people. They don't have people right now, so they really need more people at accounting firm because of the effects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act at the end of 2017.
Thanks, Omri. I totally agree. I totally agree with that. Yeah, Tony, go ahead.
Paul, yeah, I wanted to add to that. I'm dead on about the issue related to tax reform for sure. We've got that uptick. We're also at what I call a peak in the market cycle. So the public accounting firms are great indicators when we're going to see an economic downturn. We've tracked it for over 3 decades. They will hire, be short on people, be desperate for people, and that's usually when you're going to see an economic correction coming. So right now, great time to get training in public accounting, and usually they'll hold on to their junior hires, so you're not at risk even if you join in a cycle pattern, so don't worry about it. And totally agree, it's a great training ground like Paul indicated. You get to see a lot of technical issues. You know, the issue that we will have in going forward is going to be how much of the emphasis in public accounting is on tax and how much is on technology. They're taking their eye off the tax technical side and moving it very heavily towards technology. So there are going to be a lot of investments have to be made there. Once again, for you coming out of a JD or an LLM, highly encourage you to get with a public accounting firm, a Big Four or national. If you want to stay in corporate tax work, if you're thinking about high net worth individual, you can go down to even boutique firms in the public accounting firms. There are very attractive places there to go get that kind of experience. And a lot of those people are going to be retiring. So that's another aspect. But long term, you're going to have to be a salesperson in professional services to have really long-term careers, unless you're a hyper deep technical person and they put you in a WNPS office in DC or something. So keep your training, go get it. Public accounting is great. If you can get into a corporate, like Paul said, it is less likely to happen, but there are companies, Exxon is one of those companies. They will hire attorneys right off campus, both JD and LLM, preferably the LLM. And they have a great training ground. A gentleman who just spoke on our symposium group, Mike Fritz, started his career at Exxon, never went to professional services. He was the senior VP of tax at FedEx and built that tax function and spoke at one of our other webinars. But public accounting, I will mention one other thing to you, to the students longer term. Eventually, you're going to have to decide whether you're a tax technician or a tax advisor. When you go corporate in-house, you need to be a good business person who happens to have an expertise in tax and sub-expertise maybe in subsets of tax. Could be international, could be partnership, sub-K, sub-C. But you're going to love the business side. You're not going to be so excited about selling. That's probably why you leave public accounting later in life or law firm, because eventually you eat what you kill. In a law firm, it's very clearly that way. And as you move to a partner level, that pressure gets higher and higher. So keep this in mind. Start at a law firm, start in public accounting, start in government IRS. I think those are great places to start, but keep educating yourself about what the path's going to be for you later on. Implementation and execution of tax strategies does not happen at public accounting firms. It does not happen at law firms. They are tax technicians and idea generators. Implementation and execution happens corporate in-house only to the degree that I talk to these people about. Every partner's argued with me about that. Then they move to a corporate in-house role, and later on they apologize. And they said, I thought I knew what implementation and execution was, but I didn't realize how hard it was to get these things put in place with all of the business unit issues that you were involved with and working with the cross-functional groups. Again, that's a discussion. Service providers is a great place. Corporate in-house is a great place, and certainly government, as Omri talked about, is you can't lose it with any of those.
I would add one final thing is if you think that your longer term career for work-life balance reasons or some of the things Tony mentioned is corporate, after a couple of years of being in professional services, whether it's at a law firm or a public accounting firm, there's great demand for people with 2, 3, 4 years of experience. So you don't have to spend 15, 20 years at a professional services firm before you can make that move into corporate as well. So that's something else to think about. You can definitely view it as a training ground, a stepping stone to ultimately where you want to go if you're thinking about your long-term career from the get-go, like Tony discussed.
I agree. Based on my own experience, after 1 year in practice, I started getting inquiries from recruiters for in-house positions. Yes. So make sure you maintain your LinkedIn profile, that people realize that you're practicing, and so recruiters can reach out to you if you're looking to move in-house.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for that advice. I just wanted to mention quickly, too, Paul does have some resources listed on this slide, a book that he has published, as well as his website. Absolutely check those out. We will send out the links to everyone as well after the presentation. So we're now going to move on to our final presenter, who is Adam Golden, Director of Executive Search at Tax Search, Inc. Adam, the floor is yours to discuss the highest demand tax specialties and functions.
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys. I work with Tony here at Tax Search, and just by way of background, our firm is the largest recruiting firm in the country that specializes just in the niche of tax. And our organization covers mainly corporate tax departments, but Tony built our firm on recruiting in the public accounting space many, many years ago. And we still do some select searches for professional service firms as well. So, we're pretty knowledgeable in both areas, depending upon, what questions you might have. If you want to reach out to myself or Tony or anybody here at the firm later, we'll certainly be happy to help you. I've been with the firm for 17 years, as you can read below, and have a lot of expertise in helping predominantly corporate tax departments with staffing, but I talk to people in professional services all day, every day, and we do a lot of recruiting from professional services. So guys like me will be giving you guys a call after you get a few years of experience to see where you are from a career standpoint. So if we can go ahead and move to the next slide, Carissa. a lot of what I'm going to talk about we've covered on this, so I'm going to hit some of the high levels. But one of the points I do want to make is, there are two areas of tax. There is the corporate side of the fence that Marie and Paul have both touched on, but there's also a very viable side of tax on the individual side. There's ultra high net worth individual tax practitioners out there that have made a career on helping very, very wealthy families and individuals with their personal taxes. There's family tax practices. Our firm has worked on a few positions where the Gallo family, for example, is a client of ours where we help the family that owns E.J. Gallo Wineries. They have a number of other businesses, and they have a whole team of people that both handles the corporate side of their taxes, but also the family wealth side of the fence and their other businesses that they own. So if you think you have more interest on the individual side of the fence, there's absolutely a career for you there. And clearly there's a lot of demand with everything that's happened with tax reform on the corporate side. There's the traditional C Corp, which is what most of your big businesses are. The MLP and partnership structures have only been growing here over the last several years. And then there's also the sub-S entities. You'll also see a lot of those types of entities on the, and also the LLCs and partnerships on the family and individual side of the fence as well. So we could have actually put those same structures in both the individual and corporate. So you can move on to the next slide, Carissa. As Paul had talked about, and I think Marie touched on it some as well, you can be a specialist. You can specialize on the federal side of tax. There is a wealth of change happening in the state and local area, and international is definitely an area you can specialize in. As Paul indicated, there's fewer and fewer generalists out there, especially if you go into the firms. But I will tell you, on the corporate side of the fence, having an overall breadth of experience and getting into a situation where you can develop broader skills than just one particular specialist area will give you the most career flexibility long term. So if you can strive to be a generalist or strive to have sub expertise in areas, but knowledge in several different areas of federal and state tax and be well-rounded, it's going to give you lots of career opportunities down the road. We can move on to the next slide. Functionally within tax. Again, Paul's touched on some of this, so I'm just going to talk about it a little bit. Planning and the audit areas, predominantly for JDs and tax lawyers, is where you'll spend a lot of time. But you should also pay attention to compliance and the provision ASC 740 side of the fence, especially if you think you might have a desire to have a corporate career. Having a well-rounded tax lawyer that knows both the planning and audit side of the fence, but also can work with the compliance team and understand how all of that's going to affect the tax provision is certainly the best recipe for building that generalist type background that we talked about. And I also have technology here listed. It is a growing area. Tony touched on it a little bit with the accounting firms and the big push that they're making on the technology front. And I would highly recommend, as you are in school, be looking at technologies and familiarize yourself with the technologies that are out there, because if you can blend the technical aspect of the tax law and then also be one of those tax practitioners that's not afraid of technology and can embrace technology, you're going to separate yourself from a lot of other just pure technicians that are out there. You can move on to the next slide. So in terms of in-demand areas of tax, I've got two sides of the fence. I've got some that are currently in demand and are kind of consistently in demand, and then I've got some that are on the rise. Now, this is just on the corporate side of the fence. Again, that's our specialty here at the firm. So I wouldn't be able to tell you in terms of the individual side of the fence what the big in-demand areas of tax are. But I can absolutely tell you international planning, because of tax reform and the things that Marie mentioned is very much a high-end demand area, and now is a great time to get into international tax because of all of the changes and how things are so different now. Transfer pricing is also a very high in-demand area. It's been consistent, like international planning. Transfer pricing has been a very consistent in-demand area for probably the last 5 to 7 years, and that also dovetails with what I have on the other side of the fence with On the Rise. A lot of the audit and controversy issues that we're seeing now are a direct result of transfer pricing being such an in-demand area the last several years. So you'll see there's some cohesion between some of the areas that are in demand and then some of the areas that are kind of on the rise, so to speak. And then I have currently like legislative and lobbying efforts. We have a lot of our corporate heads of tax and people are involved in the legislative and lobbying efforts because of all the changes that have been happening in tax law. So the information that Anne-Marie mentioned about being able to do internships with some of the think tanks and some of the policy work, I think could certainly be beneficial for you later if you can get an internship in that area, because we are seeing more and more companies and more tax departments have to pay attention to the legislative and lobbying side of the fence as we have more non-governmental agencies affecting tax policy and things like that, both in the U.S. and also outside of the U.S. So that's a lot, several things on the kind of the in-demand areas that are current and consistent. Some areas, if you go back just one second, Carissa, on the rise, I've got audit and controversy, which I kind of touched on. And then we also have state and local tax, or SALT is the acronym for it. This is an area that, as a firm, we've identified there's going to be a number of retirements that are going to happen in state and local tax specifically in the coming years because of the demographics that we have in our industry as a whole. We have a lot of baby boomers who went into tax especially after the tax reform in the 80s, went into the state and local area because it was the hot area at the time where a lot of the changes were made from a policy standpoint, and a lot of those people have stayed in the state area until this point. And while a lot of the focus, if you hear people talk about the demographics of our industry, focuses at the top levels of departments, and we definitely have issues there. There's a lot of middle management level positions within the state and local specialty where we speak to people who are, the same age as the VPs of tax and some of the upper level folks that are going to be retiring. So if you want to think about an area, if you have some interest in state and local, that is definitely an area over the next 5 to 8 years that we can see there being a lot of opportunity for you to rise within a public accounting firm practice or a corporation pretty quickly, because there's going to be a big brain drain in that particular area. So I do want to mention that.
If I can add something about state and local tax, so I agree with Adam that this is an area where the bar is pretty old. I mean, and I completely agree. We'll probably see many retirements coming soon. Another thing that happened in the state, two things that happened in the state and local tax area. First is there was a Supreme Court decision, a pretty recent, the Wayfair decision. You may have heard about it, which completely changed this area of practice and made it so much more important for any corporation that any taxpayer that operates in more than one jurisdiction. And another thing that happened with state and local tax is because the recent tax reform significantly cut the headline tax rates, suddenly state taxes became a much more important part of the overall tax picture of any corporation. I mean, as a proportional share of the tax liability, state and local taxes are now much more serious. For some taxpayers, most of their taxes are actually state and local rather than federal. So this is absolutely an area where there is growth. And it's honestly, you need to think about it as the same way you think about international tax planning, because the idea is really to figure out how to set up your operation in a way that is most efficient in terms of operating across state boundaries. This is really a subfield of international tax in a way to think about it from a substantive point of view. For some reason, people shy away from it. I don't know why, maybe because it's not glamorous. But I mean, I keep telling my students, think about it that way. California, for example, California is the 5th largest economy in the world. I think you can have a pretty decent career just knowing California taxes, help people plan their California state tax liability. So absolutely, I completely, and I get inquiries all the time from partners, specifically at the Big Four, asking me for students that want to do state and local tax work, because this is really a huge need right now, and I expect it to keep grow.
And it's state and local, both on the income tax side of the fence, and then also we talked about, I think it may have been part of Paul's presentation on the indirect tax side. So all of the non-income taxes, think of your sales and use tax, your property tax. We're working on a search for a client right now for a big refining company in the motor fuels tax area. And there's very few people across the country that are doing these types of taxes. And those that have been doing them have been doing them for 25 or 30 years, and they're going to be retiring. And there's not a backlog of people behind them to take on those jobs. So there are absolutely lots of opportunities to get the fastest return on your education investment if you go on into some of these areas where we know there's going to be retirement happening.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Adam. I did have a question come in. It says, if you start your career in either corporate or individual, is it difficult to transition to the other?
It can be. Depends on where you start your career. I think it's easier to go from corporate to the individual side of the fence because many of the, especially if you go into an ultra high net worth or a family practice office, because a lot of those types of practices will also deal with corporate issues. Rightly or wrongly, we have not had a lot of success for our clients being able to take somebody who has focused mainly on smaller, closely held businesses and put them in a large multinational organization. Paul, you might have some background on this, having come from the consulting side of the fence and having been in one of the big firms, on whether or not you could make that flip back and forth. But that's what we see, at least on the corporate side for recruiting.
Yeah, Adam, I agree. And, unfortunately, what I'm seeing is a lot of pigeonholing today. It's very difficult to sometimes move into a brand new area, especially in the example it's given, you start with individual and move to a corporate area. I think that is probably a difficult move. I'm seeing that a lot of employers today are looking for very specific skill sets, and they're not willing to maybe be flexible to take somebody that's got a general background or maybe an individual background and give them a try. That's what I'm saying.
Now, I will add one thing, just as I'm thinking about it a little bit more. If you are in a smaller firm, even maybe more of a middle market type of practice, where you might be dealing with, clients that have several million up to, up to 100 million, size companies where you're doing both their corporate and their individual, it would be easier in that situation. In a Big Four environment, or one of the larger firms or the national firms, I think it could be a little more difficult.
Perfect. Thank you. Just to let everyone know, we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm opening the floor to any questions to any of our presenters today. Just to kind of circle back, we do have a question for Paul. It says, between the 4 industries you discussed, is there one that allows you to, quote unquote, climb the ladder faster within the company or organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think public accounting probably is that one that allows you to climb that ladder. They usually have many more rungs. You can start out as either an associate, or they call them staff, and then there's various gradations. Senior manager, or you can start out as a manager, senior manager, director. So I'm seeing a lot of people being, especially in the Big Four, advancing very quickly. I think in the corporate world you can make the advancement. There's just not as much room. I think the next step up might be somebody that's been in that position a very long time, and you might have to wait for that person to leave. That's what I see. I see the public accounting area, though, is kind of a rapid growth. If you're a performer and you've got talent in the public accounting world, you're going to move up rather quickly. And sometimes I have to be honest, too quickly. I see some very, very inexperienced people now at senior manager, director level that really that moved up a little bit too fast and did not really get all the fundamentals down as they should.
If I may add to that,
yeah.
It's also worthwhile comparing public accounting firms, the advisory groups in public accounting firms to law firms. But by the way, it's important that we take a step back and say that public accounting firms, when it comes to tax, they do two different things. They do both compliance work, but they also do tax advisory work. Sometimes they do it together. Sometimes they have separate groups, depending on the accounting firms and the offices. And even though compliance work is probably important, I suspect that most lawyers would want to end up doing advisory or spend most of their time doing advisory work, tax planning.
Sure.
Just one thing about, so you will still do lawyers work. It's important to emphasize this, that accounting firms, the advisory groups are almost, especially in large cities, are mostly lawyers. Or almost all of them have law degrees. One thing I want to say about the comparison here of advancement is between law firms and accounting firms. Accounting firms, the trajectory is much clearer. The step-ups in salaries are much clearer, and truly, as long as you do well, you do good work, you will advance, and at the end of the day, you will probably become partner if you stay there long enough and you do good work. In law firms, it's much, much harder. Law firm, it's kind of a binary situation. You can be a great associate, and then you become or you don't become a partner, and it may have nothing to do with you. Either they don't have a room to make partners right now, or your book of business is not as large as the book of business or of the other person that want to make partner at the same time that you want to be. It's much harder to become a partner at the law firm, even if you've been a very successful associate for a long time. Many people, I had this experience with people I know, were fantastic tax associates, but couldn't make partner in the firm where they started and had to leave and go to other firms, spend a year or two before they made partners there. So in terms of trajectory, it is much more, let's say, optimistic at an accounting firm for sure. This is one of the things I keep telling my students that sometimes shy away from accounting firms.
Let me add to that a little bit here. First off, I tell every young person, please ignore titles. I don't really want you focusing on titles. As Paul indicated, there's a degradation in performance in titles now. We're seeing people at manager level who really can't do manager level work in a big four, or senior manager who can't do senior manager level work. Part of that is because they're desperate to retain their people, so they give them promotions earlier. They have to promote them to get them into their comp levels because of their comp program. So keep in mind, if you don't get promoted, you can't pay that person more money. So they're forced to push them up from a retention standpoint, and they are all short people right now. So public accountants are totally understaffed. I can get orders for hundreds of jobs in a minute with one phone call. That's how many are sitting out there unfilled at the experience level, especially the 3 to 10 year level. They're dying for these people. But I try to tell people, what are you doing? Tell me about what you're doing. Tell me some of your clients. Do you have client interface, or are you backroom research only? Omri's correct. Your attorneys are going to want to be in the advisory group, the comparable to law firm there. Omri's also correct. It's probably harder to get law firm partnership than public accounting, but I will also say they're not giving out public accounting partnerships as fast as they used to, and that's because of their unfunded pension plans. See, these partner pensions are big liability exposures for the big four firms. I'm not going to go into detail with it, but I assure you They're putting people into what's called managing director roles and other names that are non-partner roles now more. So again, I'm not even worried about that title, to be honest with you. All a partner is in public accounting is a well-paid employee with a loan that they have to pay back when they leave the firm, okay? So I'll take the mystique off of it. In the old days, they were true partnerships, and you couldn't fire a partner. Guess what? They're nothing but glorified employees right now in public accounting firms. So let go of it. Don't think it's anything more than that. Look at the quality of the work you're doing in relationship to where you want to go. Adjust your compass according to, if you want to be the VP of tax of a Fortune 100 company, look at whether the experience you're getting is leading you in that direction. So moving up is relative to what your objective and goal is. If you want to be a partner in public accounting, I will tell you at some point, I would advise you, and I've placed more partners in public accounting than any other recruiter in the country, even though I haven't done it in 15 years, which tells you how much I used to do it. You need to work on your sales skills. You need to work on your networking skills. You need to work on your rainmaking skills. You can be an average technical person in a big four firm, but be a superstar rainmaker, and you will have job security for life. You can be the most brilliant technical person on subsea issues, and you are at risk at some point if you can't sell and rainmake, unless you can get into a WNPS technical slot somewhere. So keep in mind, as you develop your career, adjust your goals, objectives, what you want to be. Do you want to be a partner? Do you want to be a corporate? Do you want to be in government and then someday run the IRS? Whatever it be. But look at what you're getting experience-wise, and is it leading you in that direction? Forget about measurement of corporate ladders. Get rid of that as fast as you can.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Tony. We are at time. However, I do have one more question that came in for Omri, but I think all of you could speak to this. The question is, how important is it that I have a general understanding of tax technology? I see a lot of discussion about it in the news today.
It's definitely a growing area, and this is something that we take into account in our program. So, for example, we have a partnership with a big data company called Outrix that has a platform for machine learning and data analytics for finance professionals, and many in-house tax departments are using it in their practices. It is important. This is where the profession is going. I think if your school offers it, which is still pretty rare, though I know that other schools also offer tax and technology courses, other law schools, you should definitely take it. You don't need, I will want to dispel this notion that you need to be a data scientist. You don't need to be a technologist yourself. You're a tax lawyer. You're not a computer scientist. You need to know, it's more important that you know tax than that you know how to program. But it is helpful if you know what the platforms that are out there and that are being used. So basically, this is not different than any other type of practice, in the sense that you need to know what's going out, what's going on out there in the practice that you want to get into. And technology is something that is really growing. I recently heard that one of the big four made technology practice a mandatory practice to all its incoming tax associates. So it is happening. You need to know what the platforms are. No one expects you to be a computer scientist. Just know that it happens. Be ready to have to deal with it. And if there is an opportunity, take a class.
Yeah, I would agree with what Omri said. I think it's important that you embrace the fact that technology is going to be part of the job, and know that, especially at the lower levels of an organization, you're going to be forced, if for no other reason, to be exposed to it than you will be at upper levels of an organization. And if you go against the flow too much, you could just find yourself without an opportunity. I completely agree that as a tax lawyer, you don't need to know computer programming. You don't need to be a technologist or any of those types of things. But I do think you need to know that, the companies are putting pressure on these accounting firms to come up with solutions to help them get rid of some of the mundane work that they're doing in corporate and have the firms do that work. And if that's going to be the direction, now there is going to be a technical element to it, which is where the knowing the tax law and knowing how all of those operate is still going to be important. But to turn a blind eye to technology and the impact that it's going to have and the solutions that ultimately you might end up needing to turn around and sell to your clients, as part of you developing your own practice as you move up within the firm, I think it would be foolish to do that.
Could I just add one point, and then I know we're out of time almost, but anecdotally, I counseled one lawyer who was trying to get a job with the Big Four, and we eventually got him work at a Big Four in a merger and acquisition group. And on his resume, he had some tax technology, he had some background, and I think that helped push him over into that job. They're very impressed. The Big Four are very impressed with if you have some kind of tax technology or technology in general, data analytics. I agree though, we're tax lawyers. We're not going to be practicing in the area of technology. We're not going to be programming. But to understand what's out there, the software platforms, and to be able to talk the language, I think is important today. And I think it definitely helped the person I was to get that job.
It could be a differentiator on a resume for sure.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. I think that's all the time we have for today. I wanted to thank all of our presenters again for joining us today and committing to our program. If any of the attendees have any additional questions about today's webinar, please post them to the Tax Talent Forum and we will be sure that you receive an answer to your question. Thank you again, everyone.